week or so. All right, so we are now recording, and again, welcome everyone. And like I said, we are joined by Don and Veronica Culberson. They were with us in April to talk about the importance of bees and the ecology of bees and how vital they are to our environment, not just our backyards, but our environment as a whole. And so now, today, they're going to share some of their beginner beekeeping secrets with us. A lot of folks I've seen kind of around, especially during the pandemic, kind of got into beekeeping, which is really great considering that we need the conservation of bees. And so, Don and Veronica, I want to welcome you again. And Terrence, thanks for bringing them on two times. We really appreciate it. But I'm going to hand it over to Don and Veronica. Don is a professor of biology at Spring Hill College, and Veronica is his daughter, and they are a beekeeping duo. Veronica, obviously with a dad like Don, has grown up in nature and biology and all sorts of things. So we are going to let them have the floor. So welcome.
Hi.
Hello. Shall I start?
Sure. You want to start with just a little recap on how we got into beekeeping?
Sure. The last time we were on, I went through this as well, but there are probably new people here today. So I am a professor at Spring Hill College, but I'm approaching the end of my career. I'm into my 70s now. At some point, I'm going to have to stop teaching. And so over the last decade, I've been sort of planning for things to do once I'm not in the classroom every day. And one of the things that I was interested in was possibly becoming a beekeeper. We've been at it for what, I think 6 years now. Is that right, Veronica?
8 years. This
Good
is
grief.
8 or 9. I think this is our 8th spring.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
in any case, it sounds like a long time, but we do not consider ourselves big time experts. We're solid intermediate beekeepers at this point, I'd say.
We're real good learners.
Yeah, we're real good learners. And every time we open a hive, we learn something new. But so all those years ago, I bought some beekeeping equipment and purchased some bees through the mail. If you're not a beekeeper, you may be surprised to learn that you can actually purchase bees through the mail. And I'm sure the post office loves that. But in any case, we ordered some bees and completely failed our first year and sort of low key failed our second year. And by the third year, though, we were beginning to get things going a little bit better. The other thing, of course, is that we have been gardeners on a pretty much annual basis or regular basis every year. And it got to a point that, this is kind of ironic, but it got to a point that we couldn't grow any watermelons or squash. And it's kind of embarrassing to live in Alabama and not be able to grow squash and watermelons. And we assumed it was because they weren't getting pollinated, which was right. So I thought the bees would help with that. Turns out that honeybees are really not that interested in squash and watermelon. It's the other pollinators that handle that. So in any case, we've continued with the beekeeping. We haven't tried to grow squash in recent years. And then the other thing, of course, is that it's really fun to be able to do something with my daughter, something productive. So that's kind of how we got into it all those years ago. 8 years, great.
Yeah, 8 years.
Wow.
So I want to go into a little bit of the history and stuff behind beekeeping. So people have been keeping bees, having a relationship with bees, honeybees, for about 9,000 years, and there's all sorts of paintings dating back that far. And they were brought to the U.S. from Europe in the 1600s. Originally, people were keeping bees in like a basket type structure, like you can see in this picture here. And in order to get the honey, they had to kill the bees. So luckily, we found better ways. We formed better ways of beekeeping since then, that we don't have to kill the bees to take the honey. But this painting here is one of my favorites. It's by a man named Hans Thoma, and it's called the Telling the Bees. And there's this history of well, bees have been part of the family up until just a few hundred years ago. Pretty much everybody had bees at their homestead. If you didn't, your neighbors did, and you traded, and everyone was familiar with the bees, and they were part of the community. And so there's a bit of a tradition called Telling the Bees, where you're supposed to keep the bees informed of what's going on in the community and in the family. For instance, if there was a wedding, you would offer a bit of cake out in the bee yard. If there was a funeral, you might drape the hives with black cloth and tell them who had passed. And the thought behind it was that if they weren't included, they would get upset and leave. It's really probably more that beekeepers who were sad and depressed from losing a family member weren't as attentive as they should have been. So we like to tell our bees what's going on in our family and community and stuff. The Greeks and Romans and many cultures believed that bees communed with the spirits and their deceased ancestors. The Egyptians thought that honeybees were the tears of the sun god that had landed on the sand and flown up, turned into bees. So there's a lot of neat history with people and bees. I think we
think that telling the bees actually gets the bees a little bit used to your presence as well.
Yeah, they do know my voice.
Yeah.
And then also Saint Valentine is the patron saint of beekeepers. So that's a little fun info there.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Telling the bees. I've never heard of that before. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Originally, the beekeepers' costumes would have been a heavy robe with maybe a basket, a hood with a basket woven, or they would weave horsetail hair to make a veil so the bees couldn't sting through it.
yeah,
So if we want to move on,
sure.
let Dad get into a little bit of basic honeybee biology.
Sure. So on the upper right, the pictures of us are including the drone.
The drone.
But in any case, that shows the three categories of bees. The queen, of course, most hives will have one queen. Occasionally, there'll be some strange arrangement where more than one queen can be in a hive, but we've not encountered that really. The queen is the largest one. She has a large abdomen, which is all the better for egg laying. She's female, and the workers are also female. The drones are the males, and interestingly, queens are able to store spermatozoa from the one mating flight that they go on. And if she and when she lays eggs, if she fertilizes an egg, then it becomes a worker. If she doesn't fertilize it, in biology we call these diploid and haploid. I don't know if everybody's familiar with those terms, but the drones, the eggs were not fertilized, and so those are the ones that become the males, and they basically serve one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to mate with queens. Other than that, they're not very much used to the hive. The photograph there in the middle, you can see a lot of worker bees. I'm not seeing any.
That's no, there's no drones. There's a
Yeah.
queen in the middle there.
Yeah, the queen in the middle. You can also see where she's been stored. They've been storing some pollen in the cells. And the upper left is just a little bit of anatomy. Yeah, and so that's pretty much your basic beekeeping biology.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the drone's one job is to mate with a queen, and that would be an unrelated queen, not the queen in his hive. They go out on a flight and search for a queen out on her mating flight to mate with. So everybody back in the hive smells the same, smells like family. So
Yeah.
you can't really see in the picture because we're in the way, but the drone looks a lot like the worker, just bigger and furrier and rounder. He's got bigger eyes. He has no stinger. So that's it. All he does is eat and hopefully get to mate one day.
The workers, of course, do have stingers, and they're barbed, as you probably know. So when a bee stings you, then that's the end of that bee, because the sting gets pulled out and she is going to die defending the hive. Interestingly, the queen also has a stinger. It's not barbed, and the reason for that is, as we're going to see in a few minutes, when she hatches out, there are usually some other queens hatching out, and they have a terrible battle royale to the death. And so the queen has to be able to sting multiple times if she's going to eventually ascend the throne.
Yep.
So with one queen, how many how many workers can they potentially have, and how many
Oh.
drones can they potentially have? Or is that just kind of a hypothetical thing?
It depends on the time of year. Right
Yeah.
now, they are in, our queens are in full egg laying mode. They're laying as many eggs as they can, maybe on up to 1,000 a day in some of the
Wow.
stronger colonies. Some of our bigger colonies are probably 60,000 bees strong.
Wow.
And
And,
so they don't make drones all year. They make them very heavily in the spring. And then again, forgot to mention earlier, beekeeping varies greatly by climate and region. And we're in a very warm and wet year-round environment. So we have usually a second, there's the spring season of swarms, and then usually there's a second nectar flow in the late summer, early fall, and the goldenrod comes in, and they'll start making drones and getting ready to do late summer swarms.
Okay.
So
That's
she'll-
fascinating.
Now
Okay.
in the winter, she'll trim down to where she's laying maybe, I don't know, a few hundred eggs a week, maybe,
Yeah.
not many at all.
just
Right.
enough to
Enough to
maintain
keep
the
the
hive.
colony going.
Okay. Wow.
We're
That's
going to talk. I'm sorry for an.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Are we going to talk about the making queen cells and what to do with those? I have heard several different suggestions, I guess.
We are going to talk about that. So we could start to get into that now. It's the workers make all the decisions. So the workers encourage her to lay various types of eggs based on their needs. So when they know that they're going to be trying to reproduce colonies, they make bigger cells for her to lay drones in. When they and the same thing, except for with queen cells, they'll encourage her to lay a fertilized egg, and then the workers will turn it into a queen cell. So
We'll show you pictures in a minute.
yeah, let's see how far that's the next. Let's go to age polyethism, and then we'll get really get into the reproduction.
Okay, thank you.
So you want to, yeah, the next one.
So bees have jobs depending on their age, and it changes over time. Bees last about 40 to 45 days total. That's the life expectancy of a healthy bee,
a worker
bee. Yeah. And as soon as they emerge from a cell, and we'll show you pictures of the embryology in a few minutes, but as soon as they emerge from the cell, their first job is to clean out their own cell so that the queen can lay another egg in it. And so that's job one. And then, as you can see from the chart here, these stages are referred to as age polyethism, a biological term, but in any case, so they as they mature, they start feeding some of the older larvae, and then as they get more, I guess, adept at that, they start having responsibility to feed younger larvae, and then they start producing wax and building the combs, and have undertaker duties, since as Veronica said, there might be 50 or 60,000 bees in a hive, and since they only last up to about 45 days, they're always going to be poor little bee carcasses that need to be carted out of the hive, and so some of them have undertaker duties, and then they eventually get to where they're guarding the entrance, the hive entrance. Those are the ones, if you're in an apiary, if you're going to get stung, those might be the ones that would end up stinging you. And then from about 22 days on, for the next couple or 3 weeks, they fly out and collect pollen and nectar and bring it back to the hive. So they occasionally they will specialize. I read an article about a bee that was particularly good at undertaking duties and just kept those duties for her whole life. So there's bees will do what bees will do, but this is sort of the standard progression.
Yeah, and actually at about 2 weeks old there, where they start producing wax, is that's the time they've reached, their body is mature enough to produce the wax. Before they're 2 weeks old, they really can't even, those glands aren't fully developed. What's funny is I like to think of those guard bees as the angry teenagers of the hive. They're ready to, to face the world, and then they grow up and they get out and forage.
That's a perfect analogy for it.
Yeah.
So I have a question. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about last month about creating environments in our own gardens that will attract and provide opportunities for pollen collection. And I noticed that there was water on there. And, you know, we think about having bird baths and things like that around in our gardens for the birds, but just seeing that water is one of the other things they collect. That I would assume that's probably something else we should think about if we're, you know, trying to be pollinator friendly, is having some type of source of water, even if it's just a small
Yeah, a
tray
bird bath with some pebbles in it is perfect, because bees are not very good swimmers, and once they get their fur and their wings wet, they tend to drown. But if you have something that's got twigs across it, or maybe a screen that just dips down into the water a little bit, or pebbles are usually the best, because you can fill it just to the top level of the pebbles, and anything that still needs water can dip down between the pebbles to get it. So yeah, we all need water.
Our property is it's kind of swampy in the back, so we don't really have to worry about the water too
No.
much.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
creeks and stuff around. So so let's get into the reproductive activities. The first thing you talk about is that you know, what growing baby bees need to eat is pollen is their protein, and nectar is their carbs. So when they're feeding baby bees, the first 3 days, all of them are fed royal jelly, and that's a substance, a fatty, high protein, nutritious substance that's actually created by the nurse bees to feed the babies. After 3 days, anyone that's going to become a worker or a drone is then fed pollen and nectar, and anyone that's going to become a queen is fed only the royal jelly. And it's actually the lack of the pollen and nectar that allows her to form her fertile ovaries. So that's what we have pictures of here. And then wax production, comb construction. You can sort of see behind my head up here, there's how they build the wax, and they build it taller and taller. So, you know, that wax is their structure. That's where they put the babies and store the food. This picture up in the top left, we talked about how they also need water. So these are some coral rubble bits we have a saltwater aquarium, and the bees here are gathering salt and magnesium and calcium and other minerals from that. So they need all that stuff to help their babies grow, just like we need minerals and salt and things for our healthy diet. A lot of times if you see bees crawling around on the ground, they're just collecting minerals from the sand and the soil, and they get resins from trees and sap and all kind of stuff. So that's neat. And you want to
Point out the bee in the lower right there, who's coming home with what we call pollen pants.
Yeah, she's got and it's funny, that's not accidental. They don't just bump into flowers and get covered with pollen. They actually grab it with their little front hands and pack it on to the pollen baskets on their back legs, which are basically big furry spiky areas.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's really fascinating. So I have a question with the picture in the I'm looking at it, it's my right, the top right above the bee with the pollen pants on, which I love that. There's like a darker, and then it kind of goes into a lighter. Is that?
so that black is a plastic foundation.
Oh, okay.
So when bees are building out in nature, they build in this usually a hanging down kind of shape. And beekeepers, we want everything to be nice and convenient and come out clean. And so we provide them with these plastic foundations that
they're coated with beeswax, and they just build,
Yeah.
and they have the cells exactly the right size, and the bees just build them up.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and so they'll build them out.
Okay.
And what you're seeing, the dark up there, is where they haven't really built any additional wax
see.
On
on.
that photo, yeah.
Okay.
So you can see how they just start with a thin layer and they build out the comb from it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense now. Cause I was like, what is the black? I'm going to have to ask
Yeah.
about that. So, okay, great. That's really fascinating.
Mhm.
All right. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. Mhm.
Let's see here.
So this is the development of a bee from egg to larva to pupa to
In fact, on the right, you can see the queen has just laid an egg
later.
in the
Yeah.
bottom of the cell. One of the ways we can tell if we have a good queen is she is the only one that has an abdomen long enough to get the egg all the way to the bottom of the cell. And so when we're checking our colonies, we look for eggs in the bottoms of the cells. Sometimes we may see an egg on the side of a cell, and that tells us that we probably don't have a functional queen, and that workers will try to lay eggs, but they can't do the job of the queen. They also can't get the egg at the bottom of the cell.
Yeah. So when we're inspecting a hive and we're looking through these frames that are full of little babies, it's good if you see the queen, but you don't have to see the queen. We just want to make sure that there's fresh eggs, because then if there's not a queen, they have a chance to make one. But most likely there is one because there's fresh eggs. So we look for a good pattern, means she's laying them all in a sort of a half moon shaped rows, and it'll start towards the middle of the frame. They'll be the oldest, and as she works her way out, there'll be newer, younger eggs. So
And they'll hatch in that order as well, of course.
yeah, and then they'll
Other
hatch
eggs,
in
yeah.
that order. And we have some more pictures of that as we go along. But you can see from this picture that they go through the same sort of transformation as a caterpillar to a butterfly. They start out as a little worm. They get fed till they're big and juicy. They close them up in their cocoon, and then they turn into an adult shaped bee. And then after they hatch as an adult bee, they still have a little bit of growing to do, but their form doesn't change anymore, except for the queen. When she hatches, she's slightly larger than the workers, but when she goes out and mates and comes back, then she's really much larger.
Yeah.
So you want to go to the next one? Okay, so when we talk about honeybee reproduction, we talk about we're thinking about two different things. In the colony reproduction, which is what we just looked at, the queen lays eggs, she keeps the colony going, the workers feed them and do all that. And then what I like to call of the colony reproduction, which is swarming. So the bees see themselves as a unit, as a whole, and their goal is to reproduce like all life on Earth. And so how they do that is they want to split the colony, and so that's where you'll see swarms. That's what happens a lot in spring. And in order to do this, they'll make a few new queens, usually a dozen or so, from our experience looking through hives. And then once these queens are almost ready to, once the queens are closed up in the queen cell, they will chase the old queen out, and a lot of the older workers will go with her, and that's what forms the swarm. And they're just, at this point, they're just a family out looking for a new place to live. They don't have anything to defend. This is why you'll see pictures of people handling swarms without gear, because they're really docile at that point.
You'll see us doing that in a slide or two.
Yeah, and it is dangerous. I wouldn't suggest to anyone to just go up and grab bees expecting not to get stung in any situation. So this is what that looks like. What was the question about queen cells?
I think that was Bonnie.
Yes, the question is, I've had several different suggestions. I have recently captured a wild swarm, which you just suggested was dangerous. And once my excitement died down, I realized, but I was able to capture a swarm, and it's a very strong hive. I've just had to adjust it a little bit today, this past weekend. And I noticed 5 or 6 queen hive cells. And I've had some beekeepers say you want to remove them. I've had some beekeepers say, save
So-
them when you want to split. So what is your suggestion on?
It depends on, are the cells hanging along the bottom, or are they up in the middle of the frame? Like,
As you can see on the left here in these two.
I really don't have enough experience. Next time I will pay attention.
The ones at the bottom of the frame are typically referred to as swarm cells. Okay, and they're when you see those, that indicates that the colony, the population's gotten strong enough that the bees are thinking, maybe it's time to split.
and they will do this after just having swarmed from somewhere else. It's the season, everything's blooming. They feel like we can make as many colonies as we can.
Okay, so that's most likely the circumstance for my situation is that there were a few on the outside of the frame, like towards the edge of the frame.
Yeah, those
Right.
are probably swarm cells.
So yeah, they're probably trying to swarm. It just depends on what you want to do, how much equipment you have, what your feelings on just allowing them to swarm, or if you want to try to do a split. Like you said, this is your first colony of bees, and you just happened upon them. You weren't really planning it, huh?
Correct. So
Right.
originally, my grandfather made me a makeshift hive, and this weekend, that I've had them since mid-March. So this weekend, we had to expand the hive and clean out some of the makeshift stuff that we put together initially to make do for them to be kept.
Yeah. So if they're swarming, okay, so if those queen cells are already closed, the chances are their old queen has already left with part of the colony. They usually will, as soon as they get those queen cells closed up, they'll go ahead and move her out. So if they're closed up, I would leave them just so that, you know, the bees that are left are able to requeen and continue the colony that's there. If they're still open and you feel like there's plenty of room in your hive for them to expand inside, and you think they're, you know, preemptively swarming, then you could go ahead and cull those queen cells. So
So that's what we ended up deciding to do. My grandfather has been a keeper for about 10 years, and he suggested and said exactly what you did, is that they were about to swarm. So go ahead and remove the ones that were not sealed.
Yeah.
Yeah. We rarely remove.
I'm not prepared at this point to
split
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We over the years, we've kind of become comfortable with letting our bees swarm occasionally. I built some swarm traps. It's a different type of hive arrangement, and so as often as not, if one of our hives does swarm, colony does swarm, we capture the swarm as well, and we just get a new colony that way.
We have four full traps around the neighborhood right now. And also I've noticed in past years, when we did cull the queen cells, we ended up having to requeen colonies ourselves more often than not. So I mean, my suggestion is only having one colony. You don't have any other colonies that you can take resources from. I would let them keep their queen cells.
You might say something about the other type of queen cell there if you want to.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that middle picture in the top, actually both of those top pictures are superseded cells. When a queen is not laying in that good half moon pattern where everybody's nice and orderly and all in rows, or if she's damaged or no longer laying as many eggs as they think she should, they'll replace her. And these are called it's called superseding. So they put they can make a queen out of any fertilized eggs. So if they decide they need a new queen, and they're going to get rid of their old queen, they'll turn some fresh laid babies into queens, and that is usually what happens up on the middle of the cell. If they're planning on swarming, they'll draw them across the bottom or the edges.
One more question. When is it always that the new queen stays and the old queen leaves, or does my current queen make cells to prepare for a swarm and get, I mean, does that make sense?
She leaves. I mean, I don't know of a situation
Yeah.
where the old queen stays and the younger queen leaves. It's I think they want to send out the bees with the most experience. That's
Oh,
how I,
got
like
Well, that
with the,
makes sense. Okay.
yeah,
Plus the queens don't make the cells, of course. It's the workers
workers.
that make those decisions. The
She
queen
just
lays
lays the eggs.
Yeah. And if you look at the upper left-hand cell, that supersedure cell, it's still open, and you can actually see a queen larva inside it.
Yeah, I had a couple of those this weekend, and then we had one or two close. My grandfather said it was a very strong hive.
Mm.
And so, like you were just saying, part of me was reserved to remove those queen cells just because I didn't want to be now
Queenless.
queenless. But then he explained that it's a very strong hive, and most likely, based on what they looked like, they had already split.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, he was right. So okay, so I could see, yeah, if he was saying if there were ones that were capped and closed up, and it was a strong enough hive, or he thought there was enough of them that their chances were good enough that those would return as queens, then maybe his thinking was that if you culled the younger ones, the ones that had not been capped yet, that maybe they wouldn't be prepared to swarm again so soon. Because we've had hive they'll swarm, and then you think, okay, great, they've got a new queen, they're ready, and then all of a sudden they send out another swarm a few days later. We've also caught swarms that have turned around within a couple of weeks time and put out another swarm of their own. So it's what they're into doing. So I could see, yeah, wanting to keep your hives, keep your colony strong and not swarm back to back like that, then yeah, I would say culling the ones that were not closed.
Out of 16 frames, I had 4 full brood frames. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was telling me how if I had another box set up, I would be able to split it at this point.
We'll show you that here shortly.
Yeah, we have some pictures of that too.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask more questions because in that moment, the adrenaline's going and the excitement's there, and
that never goes away.
Fascinating. I'm fascinated. So thank you so much. That answers several questions of mine.
The picture on the right is sort of telling it. What it tells us is what happens to the old queen when she gets superseded.
It doesn't look very good.
No, the one on the right is deposing the former queen.
So do the queens have a longer lifespan than a regular worker bee or drone?
Yeah, queens can last like 4 or 5 years.
Oh wow!
Now they don't really lay very well after that, and before that time comes, normally the other bees would have replaced her. Right. But so the queens are typically good for maybe a couple of years.
Okay.
As far as laying eggs goes.
Okay, great. All right, well, we'll move on to the next one. Those are some great questions and great answers too.
So this is how beekeepers turn honeybee biology into a functioning apiary. So we want to talk about the how to be beekeepers. This picture on the left here, you can see my notes note. I take notes at every inspection on every hive. These include how good the population is, whether the queen's laying in a good pattern or not, the temperament of the bees, if they have enough food stored, if it looks like there are any pests or diseases. And I keep a note of that at every inspection so that we can go back and say, well, you know, these bees have been without a queen for 3 weeks. It's time to give them a new queen. Or, you know, these bees are looking like they're getting strong enough to swarm. Maybe it's time to do a split. And so I can keep track of everything that way. When you have 1 or 2 hives, it's not such a big deal. But when you're inspecting 20 or so of them, by the time you get through 10, you've forgotten what's been going on at the other end of the apiary. So
You just remember
gotta
one
keep notes.
one hat have had a problem, but you can't remember which.
Right. This picture in the middle, so smoke, you see the smoker in the one picture, and then we've got a little campfire going. Usually on inspection day, we start a little campfire just to keep the smoke wafting through the air. Bees work on smell, and so the smoke makes them think there's going to be a forest fire, and they all rush home to fill their bellies with honey in case they have to move. It also blocks, the smoke also blocks their fight pheromones, so that we're in there, they don't smell that the other bees are angry, or you know, they don't try to attack us as bad. So that's why beekeepers smoke bees. It definitely helps. On days that we take honey, I'll leave that little campfire going all day, just to, so otherwise you can't go out in the backyard. They'll chase you all around.
Is there a particular type of wood that you'll burn, or
No, just whatever's
produce the smoke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Dad, what do you use? Pine chips in the smoker?
Yeah, in the smoker, I use pine chips. You can go to Tractor Supply or someplace like that and buy a 100-pound sack of shaved pine. And so
People
that's
also just use straw, pine straw,
Yeah,
in
I've
there
done
at the
that as well.
smoker. Some people claim that certain dried herbs are real helpful. I don't know what, but I would imagine any kind of smoky smell is gonna work. And this picture in the top right corner just shows you bees. Honeybees are what I call terribly efficient, and if you leave them a little extra space, they will fill it. So you can see in that photo we left some frames out, and they've just built their own comb. So
there we go.
right. So there's, like we said earlier, beekeeping varies greatly by climate, but here in the deep south, we have sort of 2 seasons. We have the building season and the declining season. So spring and through the summer are the building season. That's when they're swarming. The queen's laying more eggs. There's plenty of stuff blooming. There's plenty of rain. There's plenty of flowers. Everybody's happy. Everything's great. So we talked about swarming. That's the picture in the middle there of a swarm that flew out of a hive and into the tree, and I just parked a box under it and shook the bees into the box and then closed it up, put it where I want it. The picture on the right was this very nice couple went to leave for work, and there was a swarm of bees blocking their car in their driveway. So
they didn't want to run
they didn't
over
want to
them.
run over them, so they called us, and we came and collected them. And you can see there we're not wearing any gear because we weren't really handling the bees that much. We did, once we got to where we were scooping bees, we did put on our hoods and gloves.
At that point, the bees are docile to begin with, but at that point they're incredibly docile. All they're looking for is a new home, and they want to make sure the queen gets there.
Right. And these ones were hungry and tired, and so I just smeared some honey on those frames, and they climbed right aboard. As soon as we got the queen in the box, all the rest of them followed. The picture on the left is doing a split. And so this is basically a beekeeper's forced swarm. What we'll do is we'll pull, that bottom box holds 10 frames. So if we have a colony that the queen is producing really heavily, she might have be laying eggs all the way out on all 10 of those frames. So we'll take half the frames out of there that have some that have fresh eggs on them, and we'll sweep all the bees down into the bottom, and we put them in that top little box that's called a nuke. Between the two big boxes, there's a wire screen. This is called a queen excluder, and this keeps the queen from going into the top. So she's trapped in the bottom box with a bunch of workers, and the middle box, the big top box there, the wider one is the honey super. So she can't get up in there and lay eggs. So what we'll do is we'll take half the frames out of the bottom, the babies, and we'll sweep all the bees off with either a bee brush or some rosemary. Yep. The smell of the rosemary makes them move really quick, and it's a little bit softer than the brush, I think. So it doesn't seem to harm them. They get out of the way. So we brush the bees down into the main hive body, and we'll put the frames of babies up in the top, and nurse bees will start working their way up there and go up and take care of the babies up in the top. And then the next morning, that box will be full of babies and nurse bees, no workers, no queen. So we'll take that top box off.
Well, the nurse bees are
somewhere
workers,
else.
but yeah.
Huh?
The nurse bees are workers.
Well, I mean, not foragers,
Right.
not
Yeah.
the older workers. It'll just be nurse bees and babies. And so that starts a new colony. We'll take them away, and they immediately smell that they don't have their queen. And so they'll start making a new queen or two or three. And then the remaining older colony in the older box realizes now they've got all this extra room. Hey, they don't need to swarm anymore. So that's what splitting does, is you ensure that you keep all your bees. But it's basically the same thing as a swarm, but it's forced.
We've only done it a few times, but it's worked perfect.
Every time, yeah.
I have a quick question. If the hive realizes that they don't have a queen, how long can they sustain without a queen? Or can they?
They'll go until every last bee is dead. They'll
And they'll-
stay, and they won't be bringing in after there's no babies. They won't be bringing in pollen. They'll just exist there until they pass.
And like you said, the worker bees are the ones that build the queen cells anyway. So can they effectively
Right.
create
Yeah,
a new
so-
queen?
Yeah. So as soon as their queen, okay, say we're doing inspections, and I'm putting I'm putting these frames back in, and they're all in there real tight together, and I squish the queen. So that's real sad, but they've got fresh eggs in there. They can make a new queen. So as long as there are fresh eggs, as soon as they sense their queen is gone, they'll start working on a new one.
And
Okay, so that explains why my grandfather was like, "It'll be fine. You are fine." I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what, everything. I was freaking out.
If we do an inspection and we open the hive and there are no eggs in there, then we assume that the queen, we don't have a functioning queen. And so what we'll do, the workers need fresh eggs, like 1 to 2 or 3 days old eggs, to make a new queen. And so what we'll do is we'll go to one of the other colonies that's real strong and pull a frame that has a lot of eggs, sweep all the bees off, and then transfer it into the queenless hive with all the eggs, and the bees that are in that hive will proceed to make queens.
Okay, and that's also the same or similar procedure that you would do to split a hive as well.
Yeah, basically.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, removing, yeah. So
But in this case, we're just
that's
using
why
one
it's
frame.
good to have multiple
Hive.
colonies as opposed to just one. Your success rate will be better if you can share resources between them.
Gotcha. Okay.
So get to building some more hives.
Yeah, I've already got one ordered.
Okay.
And I have a
So,
question.
My grandfather left for the day. He suggested go ahead and order you a full hive and have some boxes ready.
Be
So
ready. And also, if you want to just let them swarm, if you set that hive up nearby and it smells good, and they'll probably just move right into it.
There's a chance they will anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he suggested that too. How far apart do you suggest putting another hive?
Oh, ours are just a couple of feet apart.
You can, that's
Okay.
our back. That's my backyard that you
these-
see there. So
And they know which hive to go to? I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know they're
They do.
incredibly smart.
They do. In fact, we a couple of weeks ago we were inspecting, and one of the colonies started to swarm. And the colony next door to them sent bees out on their porch to fan out their queen's smell so that their returning workers wouldn't get caught up in the swarm, the frenzy, the smell of the swarm.
That is beyond fascinating.
Yeah, it was really neat.
So, yeah, and you may have already said this, and I apologize. I've been dealing with behind the scenes technology, but how do the worker bees make a new queen? I know it has to be a fertilized egg, right?
Right. It's what they feed her. The first 3
Okay.
days of every egg's life, they're fed royal jelly, which is a substance made by the bees. And then after that, if they're to become a worker or a drone, they're fed a mixture of pollen and nectar. And if they're to become a queen, they're continued to be fed only the royal jelly.
Okay. So, and I apologize if you had already said that. I've been clicking through stuff. So awesome. Let's see.
So also in the spring and summer, we have to put on the add the supers for honey. So that was that second box. See, we have the bottom. You don't have to go back. Oh, okay.
It's fine.
yeah, you can see the two yellow on the left. You can see the two yellow boxes. The smaller one on top is the honey super. That's where we have it arranged for the queen to for the workers to put all the honey.
Right, and they can't get up through that mesh in between.
The queens can't.
The queen can't get up there to lay eggs, so that's called the honey super. So in the springtime, once they build up their colony size, we add honey supers. And sometimes that can help prevent them from swarming too, because all of a sudden they have more room in their home, and they feel like they've got more room to store honey, because their goal is saving up for winter.
Our
goal is stealing their resources.
So that's the experience I just had this weekend. I had the 2 brood boxes, and he considered them brood boxes because I didn't have that queen separator or the queen.
Yeah, she'll move up and lay eggs.
Should say though that some people don't use the queen excluder. We've had good experience with it, but some people don't.
Right.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions for today before we did what we did this weekend. But after seeing how messy it can get between having some brood and some honey on both the same frame, the queen excluder, he explained to me, we did use it this time. We put it on the box and then we put the super on top. He said now she'll be able to lay just eggs in the bottom and you'll have just honey at the top.
Yeah, and you can see that in the next slide, actually.
So then, just before you get started on that, my next question will be, how do you know how much honey you can take per what they're producing?
So our rule of thumb is that we don't take the honey in the bottom box, because they'll be filling that with honey too. And as fall approaches and she's not laying as many eggs, they'll be filling that space with honey for over winter. Again, we're in the deep South. We have a very, very mild winter. Our bees can forage almost year round. So we, in the fall, and we're going to move into fall in a minute, but we take the honey supers off in the fall and leave whatever they have in the hive body. And then we will occasionally check and see if anyone needs to be fed, or just if the weather's been bad, I'll put feed out in the yard for them. Now, in farther north climates, they have to leave a lot more honey in the hive than we do. And they also have to feed sugar and pollen and stuff too. So
The picture on the left is the honey super. You can see the frame that Veronica's pulling out there. Those are all honey cells, capped honey.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So will y'all harvest, when will you harvest your spring honey?
So
At the end of summer?
Actually, this weekend probably.
Yeah, we harvest as soon as the bees cap the frames. I want it as fresh as
Okay.
possible. I want the honey that's in season. I really, really like doing a comparison of spring and fall honey. And if you wait all year, then it's all mixed together. So I like to take it out as they make it. So instead of pulling the whole super box off, we'll just pull out the frames that are complete. And then we'll spin them out, get the honey, and then put the wax frame back in for them to refill. These other two photos on here are brood photos. And that middle one especially, you can see the pattern I was talking about of the queen lays. Those darker cells are older. They're about ready to hatch. And so see how it goes a gradient sort of out towards the edge.
Also, when you see a frame like that, it capped and all solid, you've got a good queen.
Yeah.
Yes, I had 4 frames like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a good colony.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's what you mean by the half moon shape, where the darker
Yes.
fades out.
She'll
Okay.
start in one area and then sort of go back and forth like a windshield wiper.
Okay. Okay. Thank y'all so much. This is great.
So we want to move to the next one. We'll talk about the declining season, the late summer, late fall, and into winter. So the picture of the jars on the right is one of our feeding stations. Usually in November, the colonies are starting to shrink down for winter, and we take the honey supers off. So whatever nectar is left in those, it's not completed, we'll spin it out and put it in these jars in the feeders and feed it back to the bees, and then they'll store it down in the lower part of the hive, the hive body, what's left. And so they'll continue to turn it into honey to feed their babies. The picture on the left, sometimes in the fall, we've got some small weak colonies, and you can combine them to have a stronger colony going through winter, one that'll survive as opposed to 2 that won't. So in this picture on the left, the green box had a small colony in it that had lost their queen. And instead of giving them a baby to try again that late in the season, or a frame of babies to try again that late in the season, we just added them to another colony that had a queen, but was just a really small colony. So what we did there is we put several layers of newspaper, because the bees smelled different from each other. And if you just stick them together, the ones upstairs might run down and kill the queen downstairs, or they would all be intruders to each other. So you put the paper in there, and it takes them a few days to chew through the paper. And by then they've become accustomed to each other's odor.
The pheromones
and pheromones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then that colony, we did this last fall, and they came out of the winter this spring as one of our strongest colonies. So I would say that was a success. Yeah. So yeah, in the summer, spring and summer right now, the queen is filling that bottom box with babies, and in the winter, she may be laying on just 2 frames in the middle. And hopefully the rest of them are full of pollen and nectar for them to eat. So finally, almost finally, there's trouble with beekeeping. There's pests and diseases. And these are pictures of 2 of the main pests that we deal with. The picture on the right, the hive beetles, those are kind of like roaches. They go around and they eat everything and poop everywhere. But I don't think they really cause any harm to the bees themselves, but they will foul up a hive and
yeah,
if they can quickly. The other 2 pictures, those are Varroa mites, and they're more like ticks or fleas. They get on the developing baby larva usually right before they seal it up in the cocoon, and they'll just suck the life out of it, and you end up with a weakened workforce over time from the Varroa.
Generally, if your hive does have a hive beetle problem, most beekeepers will tell you that's an indication that you have an even more severe Varroa problem. Because
Right.
the hive's just too weak to. A healthy hive can handle the beetles. I've noticed this year we've had very little so far beetle issues at all in our colonies, because they're just really good and strong. We've gotten better at beekeeping over the years.
Right.
How do you prevent the is it the Varroa? Is there a way to prevent them or keep them at bay?
Oh, there are a lot of treatments for Varroa. One thing we're experimenting with right now are brood breaks. Since it's swarm season, when the old queen flies off, there's usually a little bit of time where there's no babies being laid, no eggs are being laid, before the younger queens develop and go on their mating flight and come back and start laying eggs. So we used to, as soon as we found a colony without eggs, we would replace it. We would give them a new queen fast as we could. But this year we've been letting them requeen on their own, and we found that usually takes a good solid 2 weeks of no eggs, and then they are able to, then their queen comes back and starts laying. And so we're hoping that since the Varroa feed on the developing larva, that while we don't have larvae in the hive, it will decrease their numbers. I mean, we're doing this because we've read other beekeepers have success with it. There's lots of chemical treatments. There is a big hive heater that we have that you can slide in the bottom of the hive and heat it up just enough that the bees can tolerate the temperature, but the Varroa die and fall off.
Okay.
There are also what are called hygienic bees. There's beekeepers that breed certain traits of breed bees for certain traits, and hygienic bees are really good at picking pests off of each other, picking them out of the larva and stuff before they close it up. So we've seen some Varroa. These are photos of our larva, but they haven't been a real big problem for us so far that I could tell. There are a lot of other, like there's diseases, a lot of diseases, and like foul brood, and what is it, nosema or something?
It's a mite,
Yeah, tracheal mites, and so there's a lot of problems they can have, but
the only things we've seen are the Varroa mites and the hive beetles.
The hive beetles and wax moths, but
Well,
they
wax
come
moths,
in
yeah.
after a colony's gone and eat the wax.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. So it seems like, I guess what I've been learning from it is that it seems there's a lot of beekeeping has to do with timing and knowing your timing, and like you said, keeping watch and just kind of getting the hang of knowing when to do what. So
Yes,
That's true.
yes, and it takes years of weekly inspections to learn the little nuances.
Right.
And I can promise you that what we do is totally different from the closest nearby apiary, because beekeepers develop their own systems and they eventually find what works for them. We found what works for us, so we keep doing it. Down the street, there may be an apiary where they do things utterly differently.
Yeah, we we'll let our swarm some. It's their natural inclination, and I feel like we sort of like to go with the natural flow of the bees and sort of work with them as opposed to making them work with us. I just totally lost my train of thought there.
So we're not, as AARP, we're not supposed to endorse anything, but I would like to ask, like, when someone is starting out with this, where is a good place to get bee supplies or beehive supplies? I mean, are there specific websites you can just kind of search for on the internet? And
there's a lot.
I have a favorite one. I have a favorite one that I order from, but there are dozens of beekeeping supply companies around the country.
Okay.
Local places. And then also you can get on like Facebook Marketplace and find used equipment or new equipment that way.
Okay. Good. I was just thinking of all the stuff that you need and how to.
If you just Google beekeeping supplies, you'll get links
Yeah.
to many places.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what Dad was just saying, that all beekeepers have different methods. That's what I was getting at. There's a little saying, if you ask 10 beekeepers how to do something, you're going to get 11 or 12 different answers.
Yeah. Well, it also does seem very individual, like you said, because it varies so much by climate and, you know,
Right.
probably what you have available for them to pollinate from. And
Also it varies based on what your goals are.
Yeah,
If your goals are just honey production, then you're going to really want to work to keep your bees from swarming, and to keep their workforce strong, you know. So it just depends. Some people are in it for making queens, and so they're, you know, maybe not as interested in honey production.
right.
I like to think we're just in it for the bees.
Yeah, I think that's great.
But we do charge them some rent.
We do charge them rent.
I was going to say, and that's where the products come from.
Right.
Yes.
Speaking of which.
So, so we were talking about when we harvest honey, that top picture there, the golden color and the red color. The golden colored honey is from June, and the dark color is from September of the same year. So that just shows the same area, different wildflowers. So that just shows you how much variation there is between what's growing in the spring and what's growing in the fall. And
They're both quite tasty, but they also taste quite different.
Huh.
they taste different, they smell different, the consistency is different. So
Yeah.
That's really neat. The bottom picture is our spinner. So when we pull out the frames of honey, we have to scrape that outer layer of wax off, and then that works like a centrifuge. The gravity pulls the honey out as it spins. Beeswax is a Hive product. We can make candles. I make little salves and lotions and lip balms and things. Other products from the Hive are pollen. People eat pollen. Propolis, the royal jelly, is used in a lot of beauty products, anti-aging products. And then also bee venom. There's we're learning a lot of uses for bee venom, treatment of arthritis and cancer treatments now, and all sorts of things. So it's called
There are
apitherapy.
beekeepers that will sell you a dozen bees for $10.
I'll sting you for free.
Yeah, and they'll even come sting you
Well,
if you want one.
And I was going to ask, is there a way to collect their venom without the bees dying?
There is. So
okay, great.
yeah, so typically you have to, the bee dies, you sting somebody and the bee dies, but somebody has invented this, it's basically a glass pane, and it's wrapped in an electrified coil. So a piece of metal wire all the way around it, and it's got a low voltage, and the bees are go to it and they sting the glass, and then the venom they don't lose their stinger because it doesn't stick in, but the venom squirts out onto the glass and dries to it. And then you can scrape that venom off. Now, I don't know how that application works as opposed to like actually being stung fresh in your skin. But you know, I guess people eat it maybe, or use it in salves and things.
Yeah. Okay.
Back to the spinner, if we can,
Sure.
Is there a way, if I don't have a spinner, is there a way to
Good old fashioned crushing.
crushing?
You got to crush it. So you just you take your frame of honey and your hive tool, and then just simply scrape the wax all off down into a cheesecloth or a strainer or whatever, and then squeeze all the honey out of it. You'll end up with a lot of wax to do other stuff with. The spinner makes it a lot easier. It's very time consuming to crush the wax and do it all yourself. And the spinner also makes it to where you can put the comb back in the hive, and the bees can just refill it.
They don't have to build up. They don't have to
the
build up the
comb.
cells again. Yeah, and it takes a lot more energy and resources to make wax than it does to make honey. like 5 times as much. So
Mhm.
Okay. Good to
So-
know.
once you get quite a few hives or several hives, a spinner's worth the cost. This is a hand cranked one. It cost me $150, and
It's worth it. Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
I had a suggestion from somebody to, once I had strained it and gotten all the mess out per se, was to heat it maybe on low in a crock pot and that would help separate the wax from the honey. Do y'all
Right.
have any experience with that? Or does that change the honey?
If you heat your honey, you're going to kill the good stuff in it that you want raw. I found just cheesecloth. If you can get a big piece of cheesecloth or linen or something you can put the honeycomb in and twist it, ring it, like maybe get one person on each side.
Oh,
Then
brilliant. Okay.
you're mostly going to end up with just honey.
And some pollen,
So,
but the pollen's good for
honey
you.
and pollen, but a little bit of wax ain't gonna hurt you. When I was crushing it myself, it was just a matter of running it through cheesecloth multiple times to get all the bits out.
Was it a hot mess? I mean,
Oh, it's messy.
okay.
The spinner,
Yeah,
the
it's
spinner,
messy.
the spinner really, it comes out pretty much clean.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Well,
that's
we-
my next Amazon order is, do y'all have a brand or a particular one, or a spinner is a spinner?
A spinner is a spinner. And you also ought to check some of the local beekeeper groups. A lot of people will get a bigger spinner and be on there selling their smaller one. So,
Ours is a three frame hand crank spinner. It works just like a charm, and it's quite fun.
I have a question too, about beekeeping supplies. And I'm new to this, so maybe I just don't know where to look, but it doesn't seem like many local places sell bee equipment, or most of that stuff is ordered online. Is it just easier, or have I just found the right avenue?
Sometimes in rural towns, for instance, nearby where we are in Mobile, there's a little town, Citronelle, and they have a big hardware store, no surprise, and they sell beekeeping supplies. They don't have.
Wow. I'm in Sims.
Yeah, they don't have huge amounts, but they do have some. But
what is the name of it?
Oh gosh,
it's the Ace and Citronelle.
Ace Hardware and Citronelle.
Citronelle.
Is it Ace?
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm in Sims.
So
there's also is there still Dog River Bees down there? They had equipment for sale.
Sometimes Tractor Supply places will have beekeeping supplies. I don't think the one in Mobile does, but I found
they make you order it online.
Yeah, it's number one, it's cheaper online, and
right,
you can get as much as you want online. And
I needed 3 frames, and I could find the frames one place, but nobody had the foundations, and so I ended up just ordering on Amazon. But that's part of my homework, is to find somewhere local. But Ace and Citronelle, y'all say, I will check that out for sure.
And Bonnie, I have their email address up there. Like I said, we can't, endorse and all that kind of stuff, but it's fine if you want to email Veronica and Dawn, and they can maybe give you a little more insight of the online spots and space and places like that. They can probably give you the names that way, I would think.
Sure. Be happy to.
Absolutely. And it's good to know y'all are in Mobile. We may just become best friends.
We've had people out to our apiary on occasion. If you want to stop by sometime when we're
absolutely
we're doing inspection,
absolutely, I would absolutely love that. I grew up on Dog River and have just recently been moved to Sims, but my grandfather is in Spanish Fort, so he's part of the Baldwin County Bee Association. So it's a whole different world out there. I had this perfect plan of how I would have everything in line and everything ordered, and once I got all my material set up, that I would start. Well, I happened to capture a wild swarm of bees, and they pretty much pushed me into it. So
that's exciting.
I'm learning quickly. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
And that's great. And Bonnie, it's great to know you're local. I grew up in the Sims Citronelle area, so Georgetown specifically. So y'all are talking about my stomping grounds. But
How fun.
I know. And Don and Veronica, I want to thank you both again so much for coming on. Terrence, thank you so much for introducing us to Don and Veronica and their bees. And again, honeyofthehill@yahoo.com if you have any questions for them specifically. And y'all also have a Facebook page, right? The Honey of the Hill. Okay.
I'm Honey Hill on Facebook. And then also we have a apiary page, Honey of the Hill Apiary. But it's pretty much just me reposting the stuff I post on Honey Hill.
Okay. Great. That is so good to know. So we can definitely follow y'all on Facebook. And folks, again, we thank you for joining us. We're just about to finish. Does anybody have any other questions? No? Okay. Those were some great questions, some great answers. That was just fascinating. Thank you again so much. Also, if y'all have any ideas for workshops like these for what's going on, feel free to email me at ddorton@aarp.org or Terrence at tlanier@victoryteachingfarm.org. We'd love to hear your ideas, or if you have questions about home gardening or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Next month in June, we are going to be talking about the history of medicinal plants and herbs. And we're going to be really lucky to be joined by Darren Glassbrook with the Mobile Medical Museum here in Mobile. And so we're going to be talking to him about that. And they actually, at the museum, they actually have an outdoor space that has some of these plants and things he's going to be talking about. So that's going to be pretty fascinating as well. Yeah. But again, I want to remind everybody this is being recorded. Give me about a week to upload it to our AARP Alabama YouTube page, and I will probably be posting this on AARP Alabama's Facebook page, the recording again, probably in a couple of weeks. So just keep an eye out for that. Again, that's AARP Alabama on Facebook and YouTube, and you can look it up and look back at it. And you know, again, if you have any questions, don't feel uncomfortable reaching out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So Veronica and Don, thank you so much again.
Yes, thank you.
This has just been so exciting. So
been a lot of fun for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And with
a lot more fun than what I'm about to do. I'm about to go give a final exam.
Oh, no. Well, good luck to your students and good luck with the grading. So, all right, folks. Well, with that, we are going to end. And thanks again for joining us. And we will see you in June. Bye.
Bye, everybody.